5 mysterious, mythical substances thought to have great power. Number 5. Ligurium. The first mention of a gemstone called Ligurium came from the works of Theophrastus of Eresus. According to Theophrastus, Ligurium was nothing more than solidified lynx urine. Theophrastus was writing in the 3rd or 4th century BC, and his work was repeatedly cited well into the Renaissance. Countless medieval lapidaries feature the lynx stone despite the fact that no one has ever truly seen one. Translations of the original texts describe the stone as solidified urine and claim that the urine of a wild lynx makes a better stone than the urine of a tame one. Males produce stronger stones than females, and finding a stone can be difficult as the lynx will bury it. The stone is a clear yellow and has attractive, almost magnetic properties. But Ligurium works on non-metallic objects as well and is specifically cited as working on plant materials like straw and leaves. It was also rumored to have curative properties. Supposedly, if the stone was put in liquid that was then consumed, it had the power to dissolve bladder stones and cure jaundice, and some claimed that a person only needed to look at the stone to be cured. Later writings added even more outrageous claims to the list of the stone's magical powers, with one suggesting that the stone had the power to change a person's gender entirely. By the time the stone was showing up in medieval texts, it could protect a house and a person from harm and was particularly effective against stomach and digestive complaints. Anyone fortunate enough to find the stone could soak it in warm cow's or sheep's milk for 15 days. But if one were to try to use it for an ailment other than what it was popularly known to cure, that person's skull would shatter. Ligurium is one of Theophrastus's gendered stones, and he says that male stones are much darker in color than female ones, a common theme in early gem science. Although other early writers like Pliny condemned the idea of the existence of such a stone, those voices were in the minority. Medieval writers added to the mythology of the stone, saying that the lynx held something of a grudge against mankind and stored the precious gems in its throat to keep men from discovering and using them. Number 4. Azith. Even those who write about Azith can't decide exactly what it is. The term started with Paracelsus, who used it to refer to an alchemical substance that he said was a universal remedy. Sometimes, it's applied to what we now know as mercury, although it's also used to refer to a base substance or a property that is present in every type of metal. Later readers of Paracelsus think that he might have assigned the name to a different substance entirely, his most famous discovery, laudanum. In the 1920s, Manly P. Hall released a massive compendium called The Secret Teachings of All Ages, and he took a shot at figuring out just what Azith was. He suggested that Azith was an alchemical substance that existed alongside the 3 basics of salt, mercury, and sulfur. Azith was a very real essence of life, and no one was quite sure what it actually was. Some suggestions were that it was something invisible, while others said that it might be electricity, a substance of magnetism, or some sort of eternal fire. It was also linked to the sphere of Shamayim, which is the manifestation of the Word of God. That word divided into fire, which created the sun, and water, which created the moon. The rest was Azith, a universal mercury that created life. Number 3. Ambrosia and nectar. Ambrosia is generally known as the food of the Greek gods and the substance that gives them their immortality, but there is a whole group of legends and myths about the powers of ambrosia. When eaten by the gods, the sacred food turns to ichor, which filled their veins like divine blood and was actually the source of their immortality. When fed to a divine child like Apollo, ambrosia made them instantly grow to adulthood. Occasionally, ambrosia was used in the mortal realm. In Homer's Iliad, Patroclus donned the armor of Achilles and led a group of men against Troy. Struck senseless by Apollo, he was then killed by Hector and Euphorbus. What followed his death was another battle to get his body back for a proper burial. The nymph Thetis interfered to preserve the body with ambrosia to keep it from decaying until Achilles could give his friend a proper burial. When ambrosia is given to a living person, it can make them infinitely beautiful, as happened when Athena gave the mortal Penelope a taste of the divine substance. No one is absolutely certain just what ambrosia was supposed to be. Even though it's often said to be some sort of fermented honey, it's also linked to the idea of grape wine. Others have suggested that it's actually a mushroom called fly agaric. The satyrs and the centaurs, some of the most infamous creatures of Greek mythology, were said to hold an annual feast called the ambrosia. Depictions of the feast show what look like magic mushrooms alongside the revelers. Number 2. Orichalcum. Fans of role-playing games probably know orichalcum from the Elder Scrolls series, where it's associated with Orcish smiths, and the high-quality armor they make from the metal. But the idea of this mysterious metal goes back a lot further than Elder Scrolls lore. The term was used by Homer, and later Plato, to describe an unknown metal supposedly worked by Atlanteans. Orichalcum was the source of much of Atlantis' wealth, and according to Plato, the only thing worth more was gold. Translating orichalcum to something along the lines of mountain brass, Plato is vague about just what orichalcum is aside from being a major source of the wealth of Atlantis. He describes it as having the color of fire, and other ancient texts refer to it as a golden metal associated with deities like Aphrodite. One ancient source, De Mirabilibus Auscultationibus, says that it was made by combining copper with a particular type of earth that only came from the Black Sea. By the time the Romans were writing about this mysterious metal, the name became orichalcum and it was associated with gold. Pliny suggested that by the time he was writing, no one was mining the metal any longer, as all the known sources had been depleted. There have been all kinds of guesses as to what a real-world orichalcum might be, from phosphoric bronze to any number of copper alloys. Whatever it was, the ancient Greeks said that it had been invented by Cadmus, the founder of Thebes. All that makes it seem likely that orichalcum was about as real as Atlantis itself, but in 2015, a group of divers recovered some from a 2,600-year-old shipwreck off Sicily. When the 39 ingots were analyzed, they were found to be 75–80% copper, 15–20% zinc, and minute amounts of iron, lead, and nickel. Archaeologists think that the metal would have been used mainly for decorative purposes, and the find confirms that at least part of Plato's tale is true. Orichalcum and the artisan workshops of the 6th century BC made one city, Jaela, not Atlantis, very wealthy indeed. Number 1. Unspoken water. Scottish folklore says that unspoken water is one of the powerful remedies for any illness. It must be collected in silence either at dawn or dusk and taken from water that passes beneath a bridge that is used both by living persons and to carry across the dead. Once the water is brought to the home of the person in need of healing, there are a few different ideas of what should be done with it. Some say that before a word is spoken in the house, the person should drink from the water 3 times. Other times, the water is thrown over and around the house to summon its purifying powers, and in some cases, the vessel used to collect the water is thrown over the house as well. Sometimes, the water is part of a larger recipe or a ritual, with some texts referring to the use of unspoken water to boil eggs that should be eaten for breakfast. The power in the water was believed to come not only from the place in which it was gathered but also from the silence of the person who collected it.